Welcome to the Air Combat Simulation Podcast, brought to you by BVR Productions. Together with content creators, mission builders, experts, and enthusiasts, we explore the comprehensive world of combat aircraft simulation.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Air Combat Sim Podcast. This is episode 15. Today's guests are Bio and Reflected Simulations. They are doing a campaign called the Zone 5 campaign for DCS World. But first, let's talk to Rob. How you doing, Rob? Been a little bit. How's the holidays coming along?
It is good. I got my 2 6-year-old kids are out of school, so that's keeping me pretty busy at this point.
And you as well, yeah, I bet. Awesome. Same here. Kids are out of school. I guess for the listener, this won't air just after the holidays, probably a little bit later. But we did record during the holidays. Have you seen this DCS World Liberation dynamic campaign that's going on around, Rob?
Yeah, I've been watching your podcast, and it's given me a whole new addiction on on engaging, on how to generate missions and to play. It's been fantastic. So
yeah, I highly recommend it to anybody listening who's interested. It's I can't stop playing it. It's a lot of fun. Cool. Well, today we have, like I said before, Bio and Reflected Simulations with us, or just Reflected, I guess, is how we refer to them. How you guys doing? Reflected, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going? I'm good. Thanks for having us here.
Sure, absolutely. And then we have Bio. Bio, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be part of your program.
Well, we're happy to have you here.
Wait. And I'm excited to talk about what we're going to talk about here. This is new and it's cool.
Well, we're excited to talk about it as well. One of you guys just kind of kick off with what we're all here about to discuss.
Greg, start us off.
I was going to say the same. I mean,
okay.
Start up. Okay.
Okay, I'll start it. I'll start it, and then you can fill us in. This campaign takes place in 1987. 87. It's when the Tomcat was, in its one of its golden years. Certainly, it's one of its golden years of air-to-air combat. And what we're trying to do is put the F-14 against Top Gun type adversaries, the F-5E and the new F-16N. And so we did not want to put that in the Top Gun class, but we wanted to have the F-14s fly in Top Gun style missions against these adversaries. And it's realistic Top Gun type training for 1987.
That sounds really cool.
So where did you guys come up with the whole concept?
I'm going to go ahead here. So a couple of years ago, I read Bio's first book, Top Gun Days. Then I reread it, and again, I really loved it. And eventually I got in touch with him, and we did an interview for a Hungarian aviation magazine. I don't know if you recall, Bio.
I do remember that.
So we did that interview, and Bio was really cool about it, very helpful. He always replied to my mails. And after that, as I started building missions for DCS, I often dropped him a mail asking some stupid question about this and that, and he always replied. And eventually, it just clicked together in my head. And I asked him whether he wanted to team up with me and make a Top Gun style campaign so that we can take his experience and somehow put it in DCS in the form of a campaign. And it took some convincing, but yeah, we went ahead a little more than half a year ago, and now it's complete. ED has it, so the ball is in their court. It's going to be released soon, and I'm really excited.
So let me jump in and say why it took some convincing. And part of that is that I looked at Reflected Simulations. I looked at some of their campaigns that they had done, and they are they're ambitious and they're complex. And I was thinking about my own experiences, and I said, a lot of my realistic campaign activity would be classified. And so I said, I don't know if I can do a whole campaign plan, because even planning a single mission in contemporary environment is complex. You've got to think about suppression of enemy air defenses and all kinds of timelines and things like that. And so I talked to Greg and I said, I don't know if I want to do a complete contemporary campaign. And so I was thinking back in my experience, something that was more limited and something I was very comfortable with discussing was was adversary or was training in the late 1980s. And it's still plenty challenging. And players are going to find that it's challenging because, we did not, or we trained very hard. We did what, Randy Cunningham said, the more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. I think other people have said that also, but Duke Cunningham said that. So that's how we got here.
That sounds kind of familiar with the whole idea behind Red Flag, right? Is you do that training up front so that you don't have to worry about the things you're thinking about as if it were your first time kind of thing, right?
Oh yeah, exactly. And Red Flag came along in, I think, the mid 1970s. The Top Gun, the Navy started Top Gun in 1969 during the middle of the Vietnam War. And it was, do you want me to go over the concept for the original Navy Top Gun school?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So when the Vietnam War started, the U.S. forces, many of them were operating the F-4 Phantom, and they thought that missiles would make dogfighting obsolete. And they got involved with an aggressive adversary who was cagey, and many of the rules of engagement certainly reduced the advantage of American missiles. And not only that, but there are a lot of flaws with the way we handled and employed our missiles. I mean, it was just a big wake up call. And the Alt report, which was the Navy done by a captain named Captain Alt, exposed a lot of these flaws. It was very candid. It was very hard hitting. And in my experience, the Navy is to be commended for taking an aggressive response and to these shortcomings and these flaws. And one of their responses, one of the flaws that the report found, and the Navy addressed it, was realistic training. It was also a range, an instrumented range that would record and play back engagements so they could be accurately debriefed. But also along the way, they realized that they had not trained their F-4 Phantom crews in within visual range engagements, which, I mean, that's what people call it now, WVR. But at the time, we just called it, air combat maneuvering or dogfighting. And so the Top Gun school, those guys did a lot of research. They put in a lot of time. The first, I believe it's 8 instructors and the commanding officer, they put in a lot of time designing lessons and identifying what to teach pilots and RIOs at the time in terms of how to employ their aircraft. So the school actually launched during a temporary halt that was called by President Nixon in the Vietnam air combat activity. And then when combat resumed, the Navy fighters returned with these newfound Top Gun lessons, and they just had a dramatically much better success. Instead of, the early kill ratio in the first part of the war was about 2-1, and in the later part of the war, I think it was 13-1 or 12-1, something like that. So this validated Top Gun's training methods, and that launched the Top Gun school. Top Gun has been evolving ever since, but to this day, they take, they're at the leading edge of fighter tactics and weapons employment.
That's awesome. Now, you say that the campaign itself is around this Top Gun stuff. So, as a DCS player, what's the expectation as far as how the missions unfold? And obviously, we don't want any spoilers or anything, but what's the expectation as far as what you're asking the player to do during this campaign? Is it something where it's mostly training? Is it you're out of training and you're going to go fight a battle, or is just what kind of the
here's the setup.
Player?
Here's the setup. The underlying condition is that the Navy has recently received the F-16 as an adversary aircraft, and this is true. That actually happened in the middle of 1987, and so what they do is they set up a detachment to work on using the F-16 in the adversary role, so they can, it's kind of to road test it, flight test it. And so the people that are the players that are involved in this have been selected from fleet squadrons to come participate with their F-14s in this detachment fighting F-16s. And then to keep it realistic, they also fight the F-5. Now, a going in condition is we had to have it set at Nellis Air Force Base due to realities of DCS. And so we put that in the scenario. Why are we flying out of Nellis? So that's fine. It's not a big deal. The air is the same, whether you're over Nevada or whether you're over Arizona or wherever. So for each flight, the player takes off out of Nellis. Sometimes he's flying as a wingman with the adversary pilot, but usually he's flying with other F-14s. And then he flies up to the range. And along the way to the range, the player has to complete his combat checklist and his G warm-up maneuver. In addition, while the player's flying to the range, I give him the flight brief for this event. And so I wrote that briefings similar to the briefings I used to give when I was an actual Top Gun instructor. I mean, they're condensed and we leave out the classified details, but they have some kind of similar tones. So then the player gets up to the range, checks in, and the adversaries are waiting for them arrayed according to the scenario, their training scenario. And so once the fight's on call starts, yes, they're over Nevada, they're fighting against other Americans, but even though it is, you could call it training, and I'm making air quotes about training. It's intense. It's challenging. It requires their concentration. And I think players will find it very satisfying. So over to Reflected Simulations to add any more details I may have left out.
Okay. So when we started to think about how to translate all this experience into the realities of DCS, first we had to make a compromise because in real life, all these missile shots and gunshots, they were simulated and called out over the radio. And then the range training officer would evaluate the shot and call it a kill or a miss. But to set it up in DCS, in the mission builder, that would mean such complex scripts and everything that I would basically have to rewrite the whole weapon and radar code of DCS, which is impossible. So we agreed that we would use, quote, real missiles, so real virtual missiles with aircraft actually exploding and being killed. It's so much easier, more reliable, and actually it looks cooler. It's more fun. So then we sat down and thought about, okay, a DCS campaign that's about 12 to 14 missions. What would be a syllabus that puts the player through an increasingly challenging set of missions, and how do we build that? And as Bio said, it begins with a 1v1 guns only engagements. Then some, I think we have one more 1v1. Then it moves on to 2v2 into 2v unk. We have a lot of 2v unk, like two fighters versus an unknown number of bandits engagements. And that's where we start adding little extra challenges and set little traps for the player. And as Bio said, it's gonna be difficult and demanding. Even myself, I fell into those traps countless times while I was testing my own missions. I mean, I set up the trap in the mission editor and I still fell. So that is going to be difficult, but that's the beauty of it.
So,
Yeah.
so when Greg's talking about this, it reminds me that all these things that we put in here, they were parts of Navy fighter training back in the 1980s. So everything you see in there is realistic. I mean, except for the actual airplanes blowing up, but that was in our imaginations.
Yeah, that's how we play the game. It's in our imagination. The So you guys had, in the real training, you had these unknown challenges or training kind of things.
Oh,
Where you would go up not knowing who you were going to go against.
yes. When we were talking about 2v unk and 4v unk is unknown, shorthand for unknown. And those were the most realistic flights, because if you think about it, if you're in a known 2v2, then all you got to do is find two guys and you know who you're fighting. But when you're over hostile territory, there was almost always the possibility that there would be someone unexpected would pop up, could enter the engagement, either an alert launch from the enemy's airfield, or someone hiding in a valley, or someone who is way off azimuth and not detected. I mean, there's, we like to think that our surveillance and everything is sees it all. But let's go back to 1987. There was probably even more unknowns. And that was a big lesson from Vietnam. A lot of times guys would think they were getting into one situation, and something else would develop once they got to the merge. So unknown is a realistic scenario.
Gotcha. Yeah, we call that at least in my group or my circle, we always call that getting third partied.
Well, that's kind of a antiseptic way to put it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, that sounds like a lot of fun to me. I especially like those training type of things. And the more realistic, the better, in my opinion, because that's kind of what the whole DCS World environment and community is all about. So that's pretty cool. What are some of the challenges reflected that you had in building this campaign? I'd imagine, every campaign has its own different set of unique challenges, but what about this one in particular?
Well, if I had to give a very short answer, it would be the same for all my campaigns: DCS AI, and making it do what I want it to do. It's crazy difficult. I took the same approach as Baltic Dragon took in Raven 1. That means when it was a flight of 2 or 4, the 4 aircraft are not part of the same flight. I set them up as different groups, so I can give them separate commands. That was one of the big challenges, but that kind of worked out well. But the biggest challenge is that in an engagement like this, you can die by actually dying, that is being shot down, or die by hitting the hard deck, which means you are not actually dead in game. So keeping track of who's dead, who can still shoot, who cannot shoot anymore, who should be shot at, and who should not be shot at, that is very complex when it's, let's say, a 4v unk engagement.
Right.
So it took a lot of testing. But yeah, we worked together really efficiently. So Bio would give me these ideas and share his experience, and very quickly we would come to a solution how to put that in game. And I was just going to ask Bio to talk about all these little challenges and little traps and speed bumps that we would lay in front of the player,
What, you mean like the wild card?
like the wild card, the VID, the echo range.
Okay, those three are good ones. So the first one I'll talk about is VID, because that is that's a condition. That's visual identification, and I think nowadays it's mostly called PID, positive identification. But back in the 80s, we used the term VID. And in some conditions, in certain circumstances, you had to visually identify the plane before you took a shot. And the reason is there was a possibility of friendlies. There's just even if it's a slight possibility, there's a possibility of friendlies being in the area. And so that is that's like following on to something I talked about, a situation in Vietnam that really removed a lot of the advantage of having the big and sophisticated F4 Phantom. They had to visually identify before they took the shot, which means they're within minimum range of the Sparrow in many cases, and so they're committed to an engagement. Okay, so anyway, so in our Zone 5 campaign, we do require visual identification on some missions, and that was, again, realistic. Another one is the wild card.
Sorry to interrupt. Maybe I could add how it works in game.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, because usually your AI is just going to flip around and try to shoot at you when you get within that range.
Yeah. So the way I set it up was that the friendly AIs will remain weapons hold, so they will not fire until you visually identify the bogeys, and you need to do that by pressing spacebar. There's going to be a message telling you to do that, and before you do that, even you can fire a shot, but the bandits will be immortal, so you cannot score a kill.
Okay.
Once you are positive that it's either an F-16 or an F-5, you hit spacebar, you can hear the radio call, and then your wingman will start engaging the bandits, and that's when the bandits will become mortal and you can actually shoot them down. Of course, there's always room for cheating because you can hit spacebar from 20 miles out, but then what's the point of training?
Right, exactly.
Okay, and I just looked at the syllabus, and we only have VID requirements on a couple of missions. But go ahead, Rob, or Joe.
Or I was just going to say, it's really up to the person playing how immersive they want to make what they're doing. It's always like that with games.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go on to the second speed bump, and that is the wild card. And this was something that the Top Gun instructors used to do during the Top Gun class, and they briefed the class fighters. They would have an aircraft that was way outside of the class fighter search parameters. For example, it may be 20,000 feet directly above the class fighters. I guess 20 is kind of high, maybe 10 to 15 directly above the class fighters. And the fighters were told that they were eligible to be jumped or tapped anytime after the fight's on call. And so so the fighters had to maintain a good defensive lookout even while they were running a radar intercept. And this was the way Top Gun implemented one of the hard lessons of Vietnam, and that is, the North Vietnamese would set up traps. They would, try to lure the fighters into an intercept, and then they would have, other aircraft waiting in a valley or waiting off axis or real high or whatever, and they try to jump the fighters while they're running the intercept.
So on
yeah.
that note, from the DCS perspective, when you're playing this, you're typically playing it single player, right? Does it have a multiplayer? Can you play it co-op also and have somebody in the Rio seat?
Let's get back to that topic a bit later because
Okay,
it's more
sure.
complex.
So you're playing it with Jester as your Rio, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you get around him calling people out with his eagle eye in that situation?
By the time he calls out the wild card, it's usually too late.
Oh, okay. Interesting. That's good.
Now,
okay, go ahead.
And we don't have the wild card. He doesn't destroy your intercept every time, because that wouldn't be any fun.
Sure.
But you just have to be ready for him on a certain number of these flights, and you have to be ready to counter him. And Greg and I talked about how to implement that, and I think he's done a nice job of making it realistic. I mean, one of the flights when I was a student F-14 Rio, I was a fleet F-14 Rio, but I was a student in the Top Gun class. One of the flights that I remember very well was when we got tapped by a wild card, and I saw this guy way up, 8,000 feet above us, beginning his roll in on us. And I saw him. We turned to counter him. And that's what they were looking for. They didn't want us to engage out there, 18 miles from the bandits. So as soon as we turned to counter the wild card, the guy said, you're cleared to continue. So we had made our turn. That kind of interrupted our intercept. Then we had to get back on our intercept timeline, turn back towards the threat sector, get radars on, and rebuild our situational awareness and continue to fight, which we did. And I got to tell you, Jabbers, when you do something like that in an F-14 fighting against Top Gun instructors and you do it well, it's a sense of accomplishment. And so we're trying to give the Zone 5 player that same sense.
That's awesome. Man, that would be something. So let me ask this. Is the wild card, let's just say this particular instance, is it every mission that has this one defined, or can it happen in any mission period?
So
I guess let me just rephrase. Is it a random event to a mission, or is it in specific missions?
It's in specific missions.
Okay.
Because it's so complex to set up. If it was random, it would be way too difficult.
Sure.
But we added the wild card, I think, as of mission 5. In the briefing, Bio will talk about the concept. And from then on, it may or may not pop up anytime.
In consecutive missions.
Until the end of the program, yes. And as Bio also said, it's really just a test. So it's not another bandit that you need to defeat. It's just to test your lookout, whether you spot it in time or not. So in game, if you spot it in time, you turn to counter the threat, but also use the F10 radio menu to call it out. And you say, tally wildcard. And,
cool.
And if you say it in time, before it fires a missile, then you'll hear a call, good break, continue. And the wild card will go weapons hold and just go away, be deactivated, whatnot. And you can go on with your mission, your task. But if you don't spot it in time, then it will kill remove one of the fighters. So maybe a 2v unk will become a 1v unk. Very quickly.
Nice.
Nobody wants to be there.
You don't want to do that.
That's awesome. So, Bio, you had said previously you don't play DCS World. You're not a DCS World player, correct?
Yes, I'm not.
Okay, that's fine.
Oh, sorry. I was just curious if Reflected tried to get you into it or to go down that road.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going after.
Okay, you know what? I have some local friends in my neighborhood here that they were kind enough to set up a demo flight. And so one of the guys has a F-14 back seat. He let me go over there, put on his VR goggles, and we did I think we did 4 Tomcats. And so I spent about an hour and a half in the cockpit there, and I got to tell you, it's incredibly realistic. So I've had a couple of flights. I also did a video with the New Zealand DCS guys, Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to bring up. I saw you do that live on Twitch, and I saw your reaction to seeing the Rio pit.
You know, those guys, and they did a very nice job. I told them I don't have my my computer's not set up and all that, and so they just let me basically hover along with one of their guys, and I thought they handled it very well, and it was it was a lot of fun, and I think they got something out of it because I made comments and stuff. So no, so Reflected, he didn't put the pressure on me to fly missions. What he did was during the test phase, he and the tester sent me some videos for me to watch.
Oh, cool.
So I've looked at the videos, and they're cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was kind of a moment of truth because we had all these discussions and long emails with Bio, and I thought I understood what needs to be done, and I built the missions. But of course, there was still the possibility that I misunderstood something, or it turned out to be very different from what Bio had in mind. But fortunately, that was not really the case.
When I first flew these things, I thought, this is amazing. And I think I watched I watched one of them for about 45 minutes. And I sent Greg like 3 little comments, and he goes, "Oh yeah, we can fix that." So, it's pretty amazing. You want me to tell you about the third speed bump we have?
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love spoilers.
Oh, geez, you're gonna hate this one. And the reason that we put this in there is because I had to do this. And so I want people who play this game to have to go through the same pain. You have to fly through SAMs on several missions. And so you've got to sit there and be on the lookout, listen to your raw gear, jink to counter SAMs and do all that. And then when you get through the SAM area, you've got to get back on your intercept and get ready to fight the bandits.
Those are my favorite kind of missions. I love. I no, I'm not kidding. Like I do that all the time in just the gameplay that I do in DCS World, where I'll pick usually a SAM site, and then I'll pick a plane that shouldn't be attacking that SAM site and see if I can do it. And so it usually ends up in that same similar fashion where I'm just dodging and evading and jinking. And
well, you're gonna like this one then. That
sounds fun. I'm all about that.
The way we set it up in game is that it's really just to practice SAM evasion. So we agreed that the fighters would be set to immortal during their run through the SAM range. So even if you get hit, you don't get killed and you don't have to restart the mission. You practice SAM evasion, you either get hit or not. You're going to debrief that. But once you're through the echo range, that's when your intercept starts. And maybe with a wildcard. You never know.
That's cool, because that kind of keeps it to the whole concept that this is just training, right? And so...
Yeah, and it's kind of like the like Greg said, it's like the wild card. We know people want to get in and engage. And that kind of reminds me of something we used to do often when I was a junior officer just starting in F-14s. We would take forward quarter missile shots or BVR shots, but we would not count them as kills because we wanted to get out there and fight. So we'd be flying in, we'd shoot, and then whoever you brought with you would be at the merge and you'd engage them. That was fun.
That's also one of the speed bumps, so to speak, especially in the first couple of missions, the 2v2s and 1v1s. In game, it's also set up this way. So you can take forward quarter shots before the merge, but the bandit will be immortal and you will be immortal as well. So there's no point wasting your missiles. So you really have to go past the merge and engage, and that's when you can really kill the bandit.
I think there's going to be a steep learning curve, and players are going to have to learn and figure out a lot. So, which is like the real world.
Sure. Well, that's kind of why we all play this, is to learn. So
Yep.
Nobody plays DCS with the intent to not learn how to do all this stuff, because it's so complex.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the topic of multiplayer. I know you kind of punted, but I'm gonna try again.
I won't dodge the bullet this time. So the thing is, I set up the campaign in a way that the player's aircraft is set to client, which means
Okay.
that they can run it on a server and play with a friend as a Rio, which would be an even better experience because Jester wouldn't have his eagle eye and he would not be calling, you know, dogfight callouts even if you're behind a friendly F-14 and stuff like that.
Right.
But there's a problem. It's supposed to work, but it doesn't work. That's the story. Because multi-crew is kind of bugged, so there's nothing we can do about it in the mission editor. The thing is, if the mission is run on a server, on a dedicated server, then the radio transmissions are not audible at all. So
interesting.
it's not really working. If one of the players runs the mission on his own PC and a friend joins, then there's a different bug. The radio transmissions somehow end up in an endless loop and repeat over and over and flood the screen with messages.
Oh,
That's terrible. And I reported it to Edie. There's been some reaction, but I'm just keeping my fingers crossed because it's really not on our side. There's nothing I can do about it.
right.
Mission editor.
Well, I think the vision of that would be fantastic, though.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, hopefully, ED can maybe come the new year here, they can help you resolve that.
Yeah,
It would be nice to have that by the time it gets released, for sure.
yeah, keeping my fingers crossed. But even if it's released like this, once they fix it, we don't have to do anything about the missions because they're already set up in a way that they should work
Sure.
in multiplayer.
And then you can bug Bio to have him fly as your Rio, and you can run him through all the missions.
There you go.
Just don't try to put me in the front seat. Nobody wants to see that. I actually flew F5s when I was a Top Gun instructor. We had the 2-seat F5F, and they would let the back seater fly, plenty of times. And that's where I realized I was not that good as a pilot. Of course, I'd never been trained as a pilot, and it just reveals how demanding it is. I mean, my best trick was bleeding airspeed. I was happy that I remembered to deploy the maneuvering flaps and remembered to plug it in and out of burner, depending on what we were doing. I mean, it was great fun, but it was a real eye opener.
How wild is that experience for you, going from not flying to, do you have flight experience in general before?
Nope.
Outside of being a Rio? Nothing?
Nope. I was not a pilot. And then and the Navy doesn't train Rios as pilots.
Right.
And then, I've often said that I learned to fly formation in an F5.
Wow. That's incredible.
So that's a sweet airplane too.
Yeah, I've been doing some work on the side, trying to I probably shouldn't even say this because now people are going to hold me accountable, but trying to do some tutorial stuff on the F5 in a different way that I've ever done it before. And I've been watching a lot of content and reading a lot of stuff about the F5. And one of the things that a lot of the pilots say is you fly it by your fingertips because it's so responsive. That in itself had to be an eye opener for you.
Well, I mean, I guess that shows that I'm not a pilot, but that was something interesting. That kind of takes me back to when I was trying to fly formation, and a pilot would get us. I mean, here's a Top Gun instructor, in the front seat, and he would get us in formation, and he'd go, "Okay, Bio, go ahead." And I I would quickly just, over control. We'd porpoise up and down and I'd move away out of safety and all that stuff. And then he'd move us back in formation and say, try it again. And anyway, so I did that a few times. I got a lot of tips. And then eventually I go like, I just kind of,
it clicks, right?
the light bulb came on and I go, oh, now you can fly. So yeah, you do. It is pretty sensitive, but you get the feel for it. If you're spending more than a few minutes, you go, okay, here's what I got.
Right. That
makes sense. And it never gets old. It is very cool.
So I'm not to digress from our conversation on the campaign here, but so when this is just intriguing me. When you did this stuff and you're flying with a backseat with a pilot to keep things in control, right?
Yes,
it was a 2-seater.
Well, these were always Top Gun training missions, and so the pilot, I usually flew when we were back and forth to the mission, like after we took off before we got into the area, and then a few other times we would have instructor under training flights where it was just instructors up there.
I gotcha. I thought they gave you the jet in a single seat and you just went to town.
Right. They would do that exactly once, and then the Navy would go, okay, this was not a good idea. Although there are some Rios who were, already had their pilot license and blah, blah, blah. But I'm not going to get into that.
That's pretty cool. Well, this has been awesome. I'm trying to rack my brain if I have any other questions that I want to know about this campaign, but I think we've answered most.
Greg, do we have anything else we want to tell them?
Yeah, maybe I would just add one more thing. So we've been talking about only the engagements so far, which is a relatively small portion of the missions. So it happens so quickly. Maximum 40-mile setup for intercepts. It happens in 2 blinks of an eye. So you really have to be focused and keep your head in the game. But I really enjoyed the part outside of the range as well, because we wanted to make that as realistic as possible. We had some challenges because, of course, I was not familiar with Nellis procedures, but Bio didn't have that experience either. So we did a lot of research on ingress and egress routes and radio channelizations, whatever. We did our homework as good as we could. If there are some inaccuracies, sorry about that, but I think it's fairly realistic. And just to give you examples, we wanted to make even the takeoff, the ingress, and the egress parts as realistic as possible. So we introduced, for example, interactive checklists. So takeoff checklist, landing checklist, fencing checklist. Jester will call out the items, and you have to hit spacebar to reply, and check the given switch or whatever. It will be also on the kneeboard cards, so there will not be a moment where the player is bored en route or back to the range.
There's stuff to keep you in the game, and that's the way it was in the airplane. I mean, there were a few occasions in my flying career, and probably anybody's flying career, where you have downtime, but during a detachment like this, where you have a short trip to the range and you've got a lot on your mind, there's not a lot of mental downtime. You're thinking of the mission ahead, or you're on the flight home. You're thinking, you're running it through in your mind to get ready for the debrief. So,
I'd imagine that's a lot like, just flying in general. I have a couple pilot friends, and even on their long trips, they're always busy doing something. Yeah. Checking and rechecking and going through, making sure they're doing this and that in the right way. And yeah,
that's the sign of a good pilot or a good Rio. And something that Greg said, I didn't have much Nellis experience, and that's true. I did fly into Nellis when I was a student in the Top Gun class in 1982. But, that was the last millennium, many years ago. And a lot has changed. And so we dug up the Nellis course rules and everything. And something that helped is that Greg is also a pilot.
Oh, nice.
And so that helped us work together to make this realistic and challenging, and for the player.
What do you fly, Reflected?
Well, I wouldn't call myself a pilot after we talk about Nellis and fighter jets. I fly gliders and motor
Okay.
gliders.
Oh, nice. I
I
hear
know.
that's
See, that's pretty
challenging.
good, isn't it? It's still, he's got a sense of what's going on up there.
That's like perfect BFM training right there. You have to manage your energy perfectly.
Yeah.
Kinda.
So
That's
how long
awesome.
did it take from concept to the completion of the entire campaign?
I think our first call was sometime in May, was it?
I'm looking for my files. I've got them right here, and I usually, that's hard to say.
Was it? I mean, so what was
So,
the?
so I think bottom line, but just to give you a short answer, I think maybe 6 to 7 months. Greg, what
Yeah.
do you think?
Yeah, something like that.
Well, that's not bad. That's not bad. I know for the Raven One campaign that a lot of it depended on some of the new features that ED was coming out with for DCS, but ultimately I think that was like over a year for that.
And how many flights is that?
So I think it's 12.
Okay, and that's like a realistic multi-aircraft combat environment, right?
Yeah, the difference is that they took in that case what they did was is a collaboration with Kevin Miller and BD, where they actually took and made some missions straight out of his novel.
Yeah. So
So
we're doing with a clean sheet of paper,
yep.
and I get the sense that a lot of players in DCS want to get into combat, and it's like, okay, that would be cool also. So we are looking. This is a challenging and realistic training environment to help people learn, practice, etc.
No, I think that's fantastic because I think as Jabbers was saying that the folks that play DCS are here for a different reason than probably your the folks that just sort of sign up to go and shoot them, because it is in the details and the realism to whether it's starting the aircraft or process and procedure. And I think that's the depth, as they call this, a study simulation that people want to get to. So I think it's fantastic. And
Yeah,
so when you come in with that level of detail into it, that's extremely compelling.
yeah, and I think that there's definitely multiple classifications for the players themselves. Like you have players who want that study level sim. You do have the players that just want to get into combat. Um,
Yep.
and so the scope is it goes there's multiple paths of different players, but
Right.
I
Right.
think at its core what makes DCS what it is that study aspect of it. I mean, I've played, at one point I was like, I just want to go up and fight, and
Sure.
lately that's not really how I've been taking it. I love there's a campaign that's a campaign generator that's out right now called DCS Liberation, and it's kind of a third party app to DCS that generates the missions, and then you go play them in DCS, and then it records the output to this third party app, and then the third party app makes decisions, and it's kind of the ability to make a dynamic campaign within DCS. And it's what I have been liking about it is, I'm really heavy on the multiplayer side. I've always played multiplayer for 4 or 5 years in DCS. That's all I did, and it was get up in the air, go find a target, shoot it down, try to use every single one of your munitions on something, and then land. That was the goal. Get as many kills as you can in a sortie. That was the goal. In this, it's you have one task. You go up and you do that task, and you come home safe, and then you do the next mission, and then so on and so on, and you're kind of trying to push the war, so to speak, in a certain direction with your single task at a time. It's a much different play style, and I've been personally really enjoying that a lot lately.
Well, so that's a good introduction because it reminds me of something I've started thinking about once I finished flying and I started writing and giving speeches and stuff like that. I made the point that yes, it is great fun to climb into a jet fighter and just go up and fly around, but you would probably get bored of doing that after, I don't know, a few weeks or a few months or whatever. And so there was a lot to be said for precise execution. I mean, on the one hand, many of the rules that aviation has in place is for your survival, to keep you from killing yourself. But also, it's rewarding to fly a good mission and to fly properly and discipline. And then, like I always have to add, the part of the reward, besides, is mental rewarding, is you are flying around in a jet fighter up, among the clouds and everything. So you still get that experience, which is, great. So.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. And I mean, I think that even transcends to different professions as well.
Yeah.
Point. Anything you love doing, you should do it well. And that should be reward in itself, right?
Yes.
Do you guys have any lessons learned or things that you would do differently if you were to do another campaign together?
I definitely learned a lot, not only about DCS, but also about the Tomcat and Top Gun and how things happened in real life. I don't think I would do anything differently.
That's good.
I really enjoyed the journey.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I really enjoyed working with Reflected. It was fun. And I enjoyed, my part and working with him to do his part. So
have you guys talked or discussed maybe doing another kind of campaign together, or?
That's the big question.
Everybody asks us that question. We haven't talked about this.
Well, it's interesting though, because it's, we've been working on, there's a new campaign that Kevin, Jello, and BD are working on. And it's actually going to be, it's called Raven Zero. It's actually a precursor. But what's kind of cool compared to Raven 1 is that they're actually starting, because Raven Zero doesn't really exist. It's a precursor. And so they're starting from scratch, but I think it's actually a lot of freedom compared to actually being constrained by the book. And they're leveraging the same characters they're coming out with and doing that. So it's pretty interesting to watch, I think, to your point, starting with a blank slate and doing that. And if you enjoy doing that, coming up with ideas and concepts, and I think it can be a lot of fun. So I hope to see you guys collaborating again on something like this.
Well, you know what? You never say never.
You guys should do something that's just thought up completely, like out of scope from things that are reality.
Or like Cowboys versus Aliens or whatever.
Yeah, in jets.
That's great.
Well, this has been awesome. I don't, Rob, do you have anything else that you are dying to ask?
I don't have any right now, any questions at this point, but this has been fantastic. Thank you both.
I'm sure as soon as we stop recording, I'll think of another one, but yeah, no, I really do appreciate you guys coming over and setting aside some time and doing this interview. We really enjoyed it, and I look forward to the campaign for sure.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I really had a good time.
Yeah, thanks for giving us the forum, and because it's fun to talk about it, and hope you enjoy the campaign.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to Air Combat Sim. Don't forget to subscribe or tell a friend about it. You have a question, idea for an episode, or a special guest you'd like us to invite? Feel free to reach out on Facebook, Discord, or via email. Air Combat Sim was brought to you by BVR Productions.